This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we get, so in full disclosure, Janice just got the conference recording, so maybe we can go back to it afterwards if there's some tips and techniques and some tools that you want to go back and review. But a big thank you to NNAHRA. When I became THRP certified, it really opened my eyes to ways in which we can just support our tribal communities. Here at Morris Interactive, we support over 160 tribes in Canada, we call them First Nations, and we're doing much more in the US as well. And today we will talk about mental health. We'll talk about the importance of identifying things that we might see. And we're not doctors, and we're not called to diagnose. So for many of us that are HR professionals, we have to be aware of maybe some of the behaviors that might be contributing to performance issues. And in that, how does mental health play out, right? As ADA is not generally required in some instances, asking ourselves, well, what policies and what procedures do we have in place to create a healthy work environment that attracts top talent, that retains top talent, and develops them to really build onto our organizational progression and that type of thing. So we're really excited to be here. We're excited to see you all in San Antonio later on, and we were excited to be in Honolulu not too long ago. So let's jump right into the presentation. I definitely want to be very, very sensitive to time, and I'll keep it to probably 8:45-ish, and then we'll open it up for questions. If you have a question in the chat, throw it in there, and I'll scan that every once in a while. Okay. So first of all, again, we do HR consulting. We focus a lot in Indigenous communities and really help with economic development, HR consulting, leadership, recruiting, and talent acquisition. And a core of our business is around professional development. In terms of leadership, we have a variety of online and in-person programs throughout North America that really prepare leaders and equip them to be strong in their workplace, developing their, I think Barbara mentioned it earlier, this idea of emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence, and really maximizing our team's performance by providing healthy work environments. And mental health plays a big place in that. So I've put up on the screen just a couple of the objectives that I want to talk about in our time frame, and I've taken snippets from a couple of the presentations that we actually do on mental health. So you're getting a little bit of a preview of some of the material that we've developed through our extensive research and our focus groups and our discussions. I had a chance to catch up with a couple of my colleagues even on this call right now, and Rick McGee, who shared a little bit from a legal perspective what he's seen, and I'll share that with you as well. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the concepts of mental health. We'll talk a little bit about some of the signs that we might see. But most importantly, what are some strategies? What are some things that we can do in the workplace to help provide a healthy and safe and caring environment for our colleagues? So let's move into this. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a sense, like I said, we do quite a bit in Canada. We are certified as mental health first aiders. So we are trained to help leaders and HR professionals recognize some of the behavioral signs. Again, we're THRP certified, and we do quite a bit. My PhD research really revolves around understanding the different cultural environments of the workplace to really help as we grow in the workplace. So here's a reminder, and I always start this off when we talk about mental health, because some of us want to be very, very involved because we care, right? But there's a couple of things that I share with you, and a lot of things I'm going to share with you is something that you can feel free to take back to your teams as you're training them, as you're developing them, as you're talking to them. And the first and foremost thing is, again, we as leaders or as team leaders, we are not medical professionals, and our job is not to diagnose and say, well, that person has ADHD, or that person maybe is, depressed and that type of thing. We can observe the signs, and we'll understand today that when we see signs, what are some of the things that we can do to provide support? When to refer to medical professionals and that type of thing. But that's really, really an important factor, because we should not put the pressure on ourselves to feel like we need to diagnose and that kind of stuff, right? We need to be able to say, hey, we've noticed this behavior, and hey, it's affecting performance. And it could be that mental illness may play a role in that. And in fact, in talking to Rick McGee, he actually said, man, we've seen an incredible significant increase in mental illness, not nationwide, but specifically in tribes. And what we're seeing is behavior and instances in the past. Mental illness may have played a role in a performance issue, but it didn't play a role in like the analysis of it. Today, mental illness is directly contributing to violence in the workplace, visual lack of performance, presenteeism, where people are in the office physically, but maybe not mentally because they're going through anxiety, they're feeling stressed, or social media anxiety disorder, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But all this is just a good reminder that we want to not necessarily diagnose. We want to be a good listener, an active listener to our team members. We want to respect and honor our colleagues. We've all been shaped, right, by the way we were raised. And even amongst different tribes, we've all been shaped differently. We want to be able to appreciate everybody's background and what they bring to the table. And with that are many strengths in that diversity. But there's also challenges that we face, right? I mean, think of what the country has gone through in the last couple of years with the pandemic, people working remotely, people losing jobs, right? We've had somewhat of a recession, mass shootings. I mean, growing up in today's environment is directly contributing to an increased volume of stress and anxiety. Younger individuals are exposed to media. They basically come out of the womb with a smart device, already hyper connected 24/7, playing video games with people all around the world and texting and calling all around the world. So there's a lot more stimuli coming in, impacting and shaping things. Okay, so there's a couple of thoughts for us, and we want to be able to be a good listener, and we want to provide some resources, and we'll talk more about that as well. So what I'm going to share with you now is an exercise. An exercise, let me go right back over here, sorry. An exercise that is a great tool to start a conversation within a team building exercise, a way to build trust and camaraderie, and at times get to know a little bit more about people in a safe and obviously legal fashion, but it's a way of having people be vulnerable, and it starts with us, right? So being able to sit down and say, hey team, we're together today, we're gonna talk about wellness in the workplace or whatever the topic might be. But I just wanted to check in with you today first. How are you feeling? How's everybody doing? If you were to identify with one person on this blob tree, who are you? Are you the person that's kind of just hanging on because things are overwhelming? Are you the person at the top, completely, in control, on top of the world, got everything in order? Are you somebody that's needing to lean on somebody else? And this is a great conversation starter. It's safe. How you feeling today? Where are you on this? Oh, okay, you're the person helping the other person. Well, tell us a little bit about that. And we know that environments that promote vulnerability-based trust, authentic trust, allows people to be more themselves and more likely to share if they might be struggling, right? And this is a great conversation starter, something very, very light. And again, you can use this in a conversation around wellness, or you can use it just as a fun team building exercise. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so now let's look at this idea of health and mental health. You know, years ago when we talked about the workplace, we talked a lot about just general health. And it hasn't been until the last probably 20 years-ish where we've definitely seen a separation of, listen, we need to take a look at this kind of cognitive, mental wellness component in the workplace. And we need to make sure that, you know, we don't just lump, you know, mental wellness with physical wellness, because people could be physically fit and physically healthy, but because of their circumstances, they can be mentally, not calibrated. Again, there are so many things that are happening, right? Think about the number of people that you might know that have either seen a therapist, a medical professional, or on medication, or have experienced a mental illness or symptoms in the last couple of years, right? And honestly, if you were to take a survey, usually it comes out to about 8 to 8.5 of every 10 people. And what we definitely are doing at Morris Interactive is we're kind of trying to help remove this stigma, because mental health, mental wellness, and mental illness is a reality in the workplace. And as professionals, we got to come around that, accept that that's the truth, and we have a great opportunity to help our team members, either through employee assistance programs, team building exercises, or just being an active listening ear. And that's really, really critical. All right. So mental wellness is specifically about somebody's mental, cognitive well-being and how they handle situations that happen in life, right? Now, is there things such as healthy stress? Absolutely. And we'll talk about that too, right? Because healthy stress spurs innovation and competition and healthy discussion. But we got to make sure that we can be very aware of those things. So let me take you to this slide. This is a question I want you to ask yourself. Okay? And if you want to use the chat, feel free to use it. I'd love to kind of maybe get a couple thoughts on, when you have good mental health, what are some of the things that we see in our employees when mental health is good? And if you want to jump off speaker and share it, go ahead and share that too. But I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the things you see? And it's a little bit rhetorical, but there's a purpose behind this. And I want to model maybe some conversation pieces that might be really, really well, because this could be a sensitive area for some HR professionals to chat about. But let's normalize it. Let's take away the stigma, because some of our best employees could have a mental illness, right? All right, so employees that are happy, smiling, they're engaged. Yeah, when people are healthy, they can handle more requests, maybe be productive and plan their time. Yes, thank you very much. Jody, right on. Being productive, yes. And then when employees are experiencing poor mental health, what do we see then? Give me a couple thoughts in the chat. What do you see when mental health is not so good in the workplace? And you've probably seen it, right? A hard time getting along with others, right? And you're like, is it that they're upset about something at work? Are they upset something outside of work, right? What's going on here? Some people get very quiet, others get very, very loud, right? So not everybody responds to life the same way that you might. But I'll tell you what, if we can step back and say, okay, this is how I handle stress. But I remember, Jake talking about, and my common sense would tell me that not everybody is like me. I know Joe tends to be a little bit more quiet, but when he gets stressed out, he actually gets a little bit louder. And that's more like me when I'm in my normal state. So we'll pick up things like that when we're working with our colleagues in the workplace to really, understand what their needs might be. What are their priorities and how can we come around them? All right. So what I've included here is something called the mental health continuum. And this you can get online. And when we do, some coaching or some work with our clients, especially around removing the stigma around mental health, this is a great little one sheet to have. Because this one sheet basically explains, hey, generally speaking, right? Generally speaking, when somebody is experiencing is in a healthy state mentally, some of those things, when you look at mood changes and attitude and physical changes, you look at those and say, okay, that's pretty clear. I could see myself in that. But as we start moving over to the right, we start to get a sense of how some of the signs that as HR professionals we might see in behavior that may cause people to act out or act differently in the workplace. For example, when somebody starts experiencing some mild distress, they're having a bad day, maybe it's an isolated instance, maybe they're impatient, maybe they're a little bit irritable, maybe there's some sarcasm, right? A little bit outside of their character, but maybe they come right back to that the next day. They come back to their standard state, right? So these are the type of things that you can kind of look at, and this is a good guide. And as they start to become a little bit more extreme, right? Somebody earlier, Priscilla said, hey, a negative attitude, right? And a negative attitude over a couple of days might be a good indication that there's something more serious going on. So when I first kind of started exposing myself to learning about mental illness and trying to better understand how to explain it to people, this little one sheet was a big help. And then all the way over to the right is when you really get to an extreme level of mental illness, where people start experiencing, depression, for loss of appetite, lack of interest for longer periods of time. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the common disorders that we see in the workplace. But just kind of keep your eye. I would definitely look at this when you go back to this recording. Maybe take a look at that, or online. Just type in mental health continuum, and there's a couple different versions of this, and it's a great tool to help just guide you as you're doing that. It's a great tool to use as a conversation piece, right? Kevin talked about panic attacks and anxiety out, and we're going to get right into that, in fact. So what are the things that cause us to move off kilter from a healthy mental state? Okay. And there's no one issue that says this is the same for everybody. Based on the way we were raised, the environments that we were in with family and friends, our education, our living conditions, they all have shaped what we can handle and what we cannot handle, right? But I've listed here some of the most common factors that influence mental health or mental illness, right? For example, it's very common that childhood abuse or neglect can influence our mental illness. Well, illness can affect our mental state. But you know what? Sometimes there is trauma that happens when we are younger, and it's something, maybe a financial situation or something more along the lines of a relational thing that was never processed the right way. And something it reminds that individual, maybe subconsciously, in the workplace. But scan this list, and you don't need to put it in the chat, but I want you to pick for yourself the top 2 mentally that you think bring you down the most. The 2 that maybe you think, you know what, hey, I've been in therapy for this before, I've had to speak with counselors before, or you know what, when I think about this, it causes some angst, right? It could be unemployment. It could be stress for a long period of time. Now, keep in mind, for some people, they could handle longer periods of stress, right? My wife, for example, grew up in poverty here in Southern California, in a home of 6 people, and just food on the table was sparse, a single parent home, and mom was working all the time, so she was trying to do all her stuff. By the time she grew up, she could handle things a little bit more, and things didn't stress her out as easy as it does other people. right? So asking ourselves these type of questions as what are the things that potentially could cause a mental challenge or a mental illness for us. But I just want you mentally to look at this and ask yourself, which cue might have had the biggest impact for me, right? And I'll tell you, for this young generation that's coming up in the workplace today, fear of missing out. They're so accustomed to scanning so quickly on their phones and not having to critically think so much that attention spans are getting lower, and that's affecting their mental health. Cyberbullying, cyberbullying and even physical bullying. These all affect mental health. But this is important. This is important that we understand that there are many, and this is just the kind of the top ones, but there are many, many others. Okay? All right. So, just a couple of general statistics, right? If you look at American workers, like I said, about 85% are experiencing mental illness, are seeking our medication, therapy, and support, right? And like I mentioned, when my conversation with our NNAHRA colleague Rick McGee, he mentioned this specifically, that these instances are growing up, especially in our tribes, in our communities. We need to be prepared. We need to be able to say, ooh, radar, I see something. What can I do as an HR professional that does not cross the line because I'm not a physician, but that can provide some healthy resources and be in that. And sometimes it's just listening to allow somebody to vent, because we all have our stress buckets, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But look at this fourth point here, right? Although 20% of US employees have generally left roles, because of mental illness, 75% of Gen Zers, these are people that were born between like 1996 and 2015. So the older ones, many of them, if the workplace is too stressful, if it's not meeting their needs, they're gone and they go find somewhere else. And we could potentially be losing outstanding talent because we're not equipped to just be a non-judgmental ear or an active listening ear and that type of thing. Okay? Kevin, will it be possible to do the same presentation with a group of managers in the organization which I work? We can maybe chat about that a little bit afterwards. Okay? All right, so let me move us on here. Okay, so this I included here because many of you are HR professionals within NNAHRA. I generally don't go this deep, but I want you to see this, because in the world of mental illness, and again, we want to remove this stigma. We want to be able to talk about mental illness just like we talk about anything else, right? Although there are different mental illnesses, many of them have very similar symptoms. So again, it's not our job to diagnose, but we can mentally say, this person is doing this. They might be experiencing a mood-related disorder. As an HR professional, how is that affecting performance, right? Going back to our role and how might be able to be a resource. But things like depressive disorder, right? Very common in the workplace, right? I'll tell you, statistics would show that maybe about a third of us here, or about a quarter of us, suffer from depression, right? Where there are bouts of maybe 2+ weeks, if not more, where there might be weight fluctuations, fatigue, just tired all the time, lack of energy, thoughts of suicide, right? Suicide ideation is what we call it in the HR space. There's bipolar disorder, which are massive mood swings back and forth, right? Loss of interest, trouble falling asleep, trouble getting up, trouble, having a full night's sleep, right? And I just put these here just to give you a couple of the symptoms, but I don't want you to memorize this. Okay? All right, move on a little. There's anxiety-related disorders, right? Things like just general anxiety disorder, just worrying all the time, right? Kids today, our employees today, have been shaped by a lot of things, like I told you, mass suicide. Many of them have grown up in classrooms that are constantly having, I know especially here in the West, in California, terrorism drills once a month, where an alarm goes off unannounced, and these kids from in elementary school are having to go through these drills in case there was a mass in case there was a shooter on the premises. That's become part of their DNA, and that's caused worry, right? So there's a lot of just general anxiety. There's panic disorders, right? Moments of just extreme panic, can't breathe, can't catch breath, high anxiety, that we need to understand, like, whoa, that might be something, right? Social anxiety, social media anxiety, and those type of things, all right? So let me move on a couple more. Here's an activity that we use sometimes in the context of talking about mental illness and removing that stigma. Is I'll break people up in groups, and I'd say, like, you know, here we have about 26 people, and I'd say, hey, listen, when you think of anxiety or depression or mental illness, give me something that starts with an A that's in that space. Oh yeah, agitated, aggressive, whatever. Okay, good. Hey, you know, Laura, how about the letter B? And Laura might say, you know, well, anxiety, belittling, bullying, and we go through the alphabet, or we break up people and just get the conversation going. Because the best thing that we can do as HR professionals, and I keep coming back to this, is let's remove that stigma. Let's talk about it. Let's have the conversation. Let's build trust. Let me be vulnerable with you, and let me create an environment where my people know that they can go to HR and just have a resource to talk about things. When people feel safe and comfortable and they trust you, they're more likely to share more. When they don't trust, they're not going to open up. And again, what happens over time? People become resentful and they might quit. And again, you might lose very talented Gen Zers that are entering the workplace because they're quitting as soon as they feel that they're not being supported from a mental health perspective. That's why more companies are putting mental wellness programs in place, like little workshops like this. Sometimes that is a great spark to build that trust. Okay, let me move on here. So what is stress, right? We know what it feels like, but stress is basically our response to pressure. Okay, and again, there's healthy stress, right? Deadlines at work to meet a project for a client, or you know, debating with people that see things differently to make the best decision for our team around policy and those type of things. But under stress, we can feel nervous, we can feel tense, and there are things that trigger us. We all have them, right? If I was to ask you privately, what are the top 3 things that trigger you? You might say certain things like, you know what? An aggressive voice would trigger me because I grew up in a household where everybody screamed all the time and it was belittling. So I like working in environments that are a little bit more soft-spoken and those type of things, right? Okay. Stress is normal, and it's important that we tell our people that stress is a normal part of life. There's nothing to be ashamed of, but we have an opportunity to respond to stress, and that's where we can come in to help. Okay. Chances are, if somebody's feeling very irritable, agitated all the time, feeling loss of control, chances are they're in a maybe toxic, stressful situation, and it probably just didn't happen overnight. Okay. Generally, stress accumulates over time, unless you experience like a death in the family or something like that. But let's talk about healthy stress, right? Is there a level of stress that's healthy for us? And the answer is absolutely, right? Think of a time right now where a little pressure, a little stress, maybe a deadline, maybe having a conversation with somebody that you normally don't have a conversation with, has resulted in something positive for you. You walk away afterwards and you're like, that wasn't so bad. Well, I think I grew a little bit in that. So I want you just to kind of think about that. If you want to pop it in the chat, great, But stress is normal for our functioning, okay? All right, so let's look at, I'm going to take you right over here. This quote: stress is not bad for you, but being stressful all the time, being stuck in stress, and not having mechanisms to have, or a release valve, can cause us to be more stressful. So let me show you something that you can do. When work becomes too stressful over a long period, that can cause medical issues, right? But I want to take you to this stress curve right here. Okay, another great little one pager as an HR professional, as a leader in your workplace, to kind of keep handy. Well, what does this tell us, right? When there's too little stress, or we're underworked or underloaded, we tend to become a little bit more laid back and inactive, maybe a little bit less productive, right? But what happens when we get to a more of an area of, where stress starts to kick in a little bit more, right? That yellow kind of quadrant there, that's healthy stress, right? Deadlines, a little pressure, maybe having to read material before a meeting, showing up on time. That's an optimal level of stress. So yes, there is healthy. But over a long period of time, or maybe being asked to do something that you haven't been trained to do, then we start moving into the orange section, where we start to feel a little bit overloaded. We're starting to feel a little bit exhausted about things. Do you know that when that is for you? And if you do, what do you do about it? How do you relieve stress for yourself? And I got a couple tips for you in just a minute. And obviously, the red area is burnout, right? We can all operate in the red area for a short time in small bursts, but we need to come back to that yellow area. There are times, because of work situations, where we might live in that red area for a long time, right? If we're an HR team, I was part of a group in the corporate world many years ago, and there was 3 of us, and 2 of them quit, and it was just me. And although I was good at what I did, I couldn't handle 3 people's worth of work, but the work needed to get done. So I kind of lived in that red space for like 2 months until I was able to get some help, but it was not comfortable. It was not healthy. It was very, very toxic. And I had to raise my hand numerous times to say, listen, I ain't gonna be able to last much longer. I'm sharing that with you because 2 people left already. And I want to be open and honest because I trust you all. We need to do something about this, because the stress is what's causing the turnover of people quitting. And the department had to look at things a little bit differently. Okay, excellent. Okay, so here's the stress bucket. Here's another great visual illustration that you can use when you're talking to team members or even to colleagues, or use that as an example. I'll say, listen, we all have a stress bucket, and water is always pouring into that bucket. And hopefully, the little hole at the bottom of the bucket that exists, hopefully the amount of water that's coming in is less than the amount of the size of the hole, or about the same size, so that the bucket maintains a low level. Okay, healthy. But there are times when we start pouring lots of water into that bucket, and what that large amount of water is for you, right? It's different for all of us. It could be deadlines. It could be go speak in front of 30 people. It could be go work by yourself. I mean, we all have it differently. What is it that starts to fill your bucket and makes you feel overwhelmed, right? And if that little hole we have can't handle it, it overflows, and we all see it. We all see outside of the bucket. We may not be able to see inside the bucket from the side view, but when it overflows and the floor is getting flooded and things are falling apart, we see that. So I always will ask my colleagues, hey, write down, and you don't have to do this, but I'll say, hey, write down some of the things that fill your bucket with some stress. What are some of the strategies that you use to kind of cope with that? And when people talk about those things, stress goes down just in talking about it, right? Right? Exercising, time for myself, getting away from other people, right? Or it may be, hey, I want to go be with other people. You know what that is for you. I usually in a workshop will have people write that down. I want you to write down the top 3 things that stress you out and the top 3 things that you do when you get stressed. And just by creating that awareness, our emotional intelligence increases, our self-awareness increases. We've immediately given ourselves a customized list of how to deal with stress. Some people say, I've never thought about it that way. I've never actually sat down and written it out. And now that it's written out, wow, I got something to turn to, okay? Or somebody that I need to call. These are the responses we generally go to in stress, right? Sometimes we just, we'll try to work it out, and when it gets too much, we might freeze and stall, and the walls go up. We may just leave and avoid it altogether, or flight, or we may say, okay, we're going to go at it now. All right, you've really pushed my last button, and it becomes an unhealthy conversation. But let me show you some things that we can do to reduce stress, right? And I want to be very respectful for your time. I'll finish you up in 3 minutes, and then I'll leave it open if anybody wants to chat about some stuff, okay? So some strategies. Hey, Caitlin McHugh had just said, hey, exercising. When we get up and we exercise, we sometimes reset our body. Go take a walk outside. It may be just breathing a little bit physically. It may be making a phone call to a friend, right? For some people, physical activity is very good, okay? For others, it may be reading or something like that, okay? So that is one option. Think about that, because what I'm giving you now is some ideas for you to think about that maybe you never thought about, that was a stress relieving mechanism, right? I know people that collect ceramic horses. Other people love, like I said, reading books or a specific type of book, right? Rest. For our bodies to be healthy mentally, not only physically, we need to give ourselves rest, right? Do you have a planned rest schedule for yourself, or at least approximate? Or are you winging it and it's not a priority? Okay. If you know what people's priorities are in their life, watch where they spend their time. And I'll have that candid conversation with people, because where people spend their time is where their priority is, right? But rest, and that might be taking a break once in a while from your computer screen and just taking a quick walk around the building or around the office. So physical movement is one way of kind of relieving stress. It could be an intense workout. It could be just, moving your neck and like I said, a short walk. Resting helps reduce stress and that type of thing, okay? Meals, right? Eating regularly, eating healthy, drinking lots of fluids. These are the things that somebody will send me a note afterwards, and they'll say, hey, you know what? I just started drinking more water, because I remember you said that meals and stuff like that, a protein bar, I've inserted a protein bar and a little bit more water each day, and man, I feel the difference. Kevin brought up a good thought around, hey, in Japan, corporate people have time for a nap. Where my family's from Spain and from South America, we have siestas. We'll go home and we'll sleep for 2 hours and then go back to work. And then we may stay open a little bit later, but rest is important. In fact, sometimes rest is put before profit. And sometimes in the US, we don't always understand that, right? Bolivia too, right? Janice says, hey, I use the Calm app. Yeah, there's some incredible audio things for those of you that love music or that just love sounds, right? There are sounds on your app that can help you go to sleep. White noise, they call it. You know what? My daughter turned me on to, she's like, Dad, you know what? I started listening to bossa nova music. I'm like, bossa nova music? You know what? I'm not so used to, I'm an 80s kid. I like the 80s rock stuff. That relaxes me. My wife's like, I don't know how you can listen to all that stuff. My daughter is 26. She's like, Dad, I'm listening to music from the 60s, like the bossa nova style. Listen to it. And literally, I popped it on yesterday or the day before. I fell asleep in like 2 minutes because it was just so relaxing. What is it that relaxes you to listen to? Is it maybe books on tape? Right? Think about that, right? Bamboo flute, music from the Andes, right? I mean, it's different. cultural music, you know, from your tribal community. What is it that just helps you recalibrate a little bit, right? And this is one, breathing exercises. I'll tell you, everybody, this is one that you could do anytime, and you don't have to be worried about people watching you. Breathe in slowly as you count to 5, right? Nice and slow. Stop, hold it for 2 or 3 seconds, and then breathe out as you count to 5. You do that 5 to 10 times, your body is forced to focus physically and not to think about the stress that you're working on at that moment. And there are many, many stress breathing exercises around stress, about breathing and slowing down. I heard one the other day, was brilliant. This therapist said, you know what? As you're breathing in, imagine you're just breathing in just, you know, clean air. Well, maybe not here in Southern California, but you're breathing in clean air, metaphorically speaking. And as that clean air goes into your body, it's restoring your body. And then when you breathe out, just imagine you're breathing out all the bad air inside you, the anxiety, that kind of stuff. And I just started doing that. I was like, hey, this kind of works. Because I was so focused on doing that, I forgot what I was thinking about. So that was, you know, a thought from one of my therapist friends. She always says she's all about breathing, and she's always telling us different breathing exercises. Okay, so breathing, right? Creative expression, right? Some people love to paint. Some people love to travel. Some people like to go to museums. You know, whatever that is for you, it's different for everybody. Creative expression is a great stress reducing tactic. All right, 1 more minute. Socialize with people, talk with people, interact. And then lastly, and this is okay, everybody, having that cathartic cry. Now, what is a cathartic cry? That's that ugly cry when you're like, you're so stressed, you go to the movies, you watch something and it touches your heartstrings because you can relate to it, and you just bawl. It may be by yourself, it may be around certain people, but once in a while, having that large cry, that large release, closes the cycle, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a renewed environment. Okay. All right. So talk about mental health. You know, asking people like, hey, you seem a bit worried. I'm a little bit worried about you. How can I help? It seems like you're going through a tough time. Is everything okay? Anything I could do for you? Right? You don't want to say, hey, it looks like you got bipolar disorder. You know, let's talk about that. Are you taking your medication? No, first of all, that's illegal. But there are things you could do to hinder conversation, right? 2 last quotes. People will forget what you said. They'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And as HR professionals, we have the ability to make our team members feel comfortable by being a good place for them to come and talk to. Does your colleagues trust you? Have you created that environment? Or is it strictly firm policy, transactional relationships? You know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. All right. So that's all I have for you. Hey, I'm excited. Morris, we're excited to see more, to see all you guys from here on Morris Interactive's behalf, to see you in San Antonio. We'd love to chat with you about this stuff. Again, this is just some snippets of a half-day workshop we do. We do another one that's a deep dive for leaders on how to really get in on mental health. But we have a whole series of workshops on leadership and emotional intelligence. We have a lot of assessment tools that we use that you can use in-house. So having said that, thanks for your time today. I'm going to stick around here, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions for you. But having said that, everybody, have a fantastic day. You're excused to go, and I'll stick around for you. Feel free to pop on your mic, but I'll start answering some of these questions as well. All right, Janet, thank you. Judith, thank you so much for everything. Good to be with you all. Caitlin just put our website up there for you guys as well. Have a good one. All right, you're welcome, Terry Lynn. You're welcome, Caitlin. Thank you, Denise. Appreciate you. All right, thank you, Lester. Hey, Priscilla, we're not doing something specifically in San Antonio this time, but we will be there, and I'll be happy to talk with you one-on-one about it, and maybe we can chat a little bit more about that stuff. But maybe the next one we'll be there doing a session. But I'll be there to chat with you. Morgan and I will be there as well.